Now what we're going to do is show how to load a kiln. And we're going to do it on the outside of the kiln because for obvious reasons it's a lot easier to show so you can actually see how it's done. First thing we want to start with in the case of the single large shelf is to take 3 1-inch high posts, and we want to sort of a triangular setup here. Pretend that this is the kiln bottom, and in this case I'll start with putting a full shelf down, and on the larger kilns you would have to have 2 of the half shelves, and you'd have to have 3 posts per shelf. The reason we use the 3 posts is so that this won't rock, and that's important because as this thing starts to build up, if it gets wobbly, then you're going to have a lot of problems, and you don't want to have those problems. Now, the reason that we have the 1-inch shelves under there is, or excuse me, the 1-inch posts, is that we want to have airspace underneath the shelf. A couple of reasons for that. One is we don't want the cold bottom of the kiln conducting heat away from the shelf or your work. This allows the heat to circulate underneath the shelf. So right now I'm going to load up the bottom, and the bottom tends naturally to fire a little bit cooler, and so you may want to put some of your lighter work on the bottom. Not necessary. But the one thing you want to make sure of is that you don't shield work in the center from the radiation of the elements. So if I were to put, for instance, let's see, if I had a very big piece that I wanted to fire, I might actually want to stick this in the center, and that would get the heat from all the way around. Now, I'm not going to leave that there because in this case, piece this size, I may only get a few pieces in there. So, but I just wanted to show you the principle that if you were loading something like this, that you wouldn't put this right up next to the elements of the kiln. So, I'm going to build up the kilns, and I'm going to look for the next size up. Now this will work just fine because it will be few inches, no, it's about 1 inch above where this particular layer is. And you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm trying to keep this about where the other posts are. And the reason for that is that ideally I want these all the way to go down through the post. So now we're going to take the next shelf. This is one of the shelves that I had coated with the kiln wash, and notice we want to make sure that that coated side is facing up. I didn't coat this one yet, but it should be coated. Now I'm going to now load some more pieces on here, and I will put these all the way around. And I have an interesting thing here is that these tall pieces are larger or taller than the posts that I have. So I have to do a little bit of creative adjustment. And what I want to do here is take my largest post. Again, I'll keep it on top of where the other posts are. That in a little bit. And what I'm going to do is take a little smaller post and just rest that right on top of the short or the long post that's underneath of it, and that gives me a little air space above the next layer. Now actually in this case what I'm going to need to do is put 6 post sets down, because I'm going to have to use my half shelves now. So I'm going to have to get away from my principle of having these go right underneath each one. But I do want to have 3 posts for every shelf. So I'll do that. And now I can put my half shelves on. And one of the things that we want to talk about here is that we're going to keep everything loose. We don't want anything to touch, although bisqueware can be packed tighter than glazing. It's allowed to touch. When you're bisquing, it's okay if it touches. When you're glazing, you absolutely cannot have the pieces touching each other because the glaze will fuse to each other, and that will create problems. Notice that I'm not putting any of the work near the elements, and I'm not blocking any of the radiation. Now, one of the things that we probably want to do at this point is show, we'll make sure that we're not going to get too high here. And we want to go 27 inches. We want to have a little bit of space underneath, which would give me just enough room, I think, for a layer of these pots here. So we'll put them on here. And there's one other thing that I want to talk about, although I'm not doing it in this particular case, but it's a real good idea, if you can, depending on the type of load that you're putting in there, to have the half shelves staggered. And what this will do is allow air circulation to get through the kiln. So in that case, I may want to put these on top and have this shelf down below like this, and have some of these here, and that allows a lot of air circulation. You'll notice I'm putting the tops on these bisqued pieces right on the teapot, and that will help keep the same amount of heat work go to the top as it does to the teapot. That'll help the top fire evenly and fit afterwards. And that's pretty much it. Now, of course, we'll just review very quickly some of the principles here. We want to keep aware of radiation, and all of the heat transfer in the higher ranges of the temperatures, which would be, say, above 1400 degrees, it's just going to be radiation, just red heat. So if I have something here, all this radiation is coming from this surface, it is going to block pieces in the center. So naturally, the pieces in the very center of the kiln are going to fire a little cooler, and there's probably not a whole lot you can do about that. The 3-zone control in the kiln will maintain temperatures top to bottom, and the kiln, even when it's programmed to be a single-zone control, which you can do, will still maintain a reasonably even temperature, even though it's not as even as a 3-zone control. But for most ceramics work, which is really pretty forgiving, it would be fine. But there are going to be cold spots, and there's nothing really that you can do about it except to load in such a way that it's not as big of an issue. And again, this is one of those cases where you really need to get experience with firing. Fire at first parts that are non-critical, that you can afford to have problems with, and don't put your life savings in your first load in the kiln. I think that's probably just a pretty easy, common sense rule of thumb. But and again, I mean, there's a million ways to load, and there's all kinds of things that are specialized things. For instance, if this were a glazed part and I had glaze on the bottom, I might put what's called a stilt under here, and that's basically a little ceramic piece that has little metal pieces that would impinge on the part, and the glaze wouldn't stick to that. And then there's specialized things for firing tiles, and there's a variety of different fixtures and kiln furniture for doing tile work. So it's a deep and complicated subject, and for the most part, you just want to start, and you want to keep in mind your basic principles of allowing the radiation to get into the kiln, not firing it too full, and experimentation and keeping track of what you do.